So a lot of college courses, especially in biology, they'll give you a bunch of facts, and the test will pick one random fact and test you on it. That's not how this test works, right? This test works by, especially in the sciences, this test works by testing your fundamental knowledge of chemistry, physics, biology, and biochemistry, right? So do your best to really understand what's going on, with the topics, right? Rather than it's always good to know as much as possible, but if you have a limited time frame to study, then you want to focus on the fundamentals, not random isolated details, if that makes sense, right? So yeah, time is a big issue, but fortunately on this new test, you have more time per question than the old one. So although it is a longer test, basically in the old test, you had 52 questions per science section. Now it's 59, but you get a lot more time to do those questions, right? So time is still an issue, but it's better. In case any of you have taken the old test, it's better than the old test, right? You have more time per question. Yeah, once again, verbal reasoning is really important because the med schools really want a high CARS score. Reason being, a lot of students get the equivalent of 12 and 13. I'm not too familiar with the new scoring and the exact percentiles, but on the old scoring, which most of us are familiar with, a lot of pre-meds get 12s and 13s in the science section, but very few get a 12 in the verbal, right? That's really, really, really rare. So it's actually best to focus just as much time on this section, if not more, because a lot of you guys are science majors and are unfamiliar with, the way that humanities questions or English questions or history questions are phrased. So I would actually spend just as much, if not more, time on the CARS section, aka verbal reasoning, right? Because med schools really want to see a high score there because they're always looking for, what separates you from the 100,000 other people applying. I think it's 100,000, some ridiculous number. So yeah, you will be asked familiar concepts in an unfamiliar way. That's pretty self-explanatory. Process of elimination, we're going to go over that when we do the passages. Yeah, and of course, number 6, if you're running out of time, let's say you have 30 seconds left, but a whole passage to do. Hopefully this doesn't come down to it, but let's say that you had to spend a lot of time on the other passages. You've got one passage left. You always have to be aware of the time because if you have 30 seconds, you better pick an answer choice because otherwise, it's basically you're losing 3 points, right? So yeah, answer every question. And always do your best to eliminate answer choices because even if, once again, even if you don't know the answer, if you can get it down to, a 50-50 chance, that's really good, right? That's a lot better than 1 out of 4, right? So you always want to be looking to do process of elimination to get as many right answers as you can.
I had a question.
Yeah.
For the verbal reasoning, did you have any strategies, or did you do anything, you read every day, right?
Yeah, so basically if you take any review course, there's going to be a verbal instructor, and they're going to give you that company's strategy for how to do well on verbal. So that will work for a lot of people, but everybody, here's the thing, once you start studying, you're going to realize what works for you and what doesn't. So everybody has their own unique strategy. Now when you say reading every day, do you mean passages or outside material?
Yeah, outside material.
Okay, so if you have time, so let's say when do you, for example, when do you plan to take the MCAT?
Next year.
Next year, okay, so you've got about a year. Yeah, it's helpful to read newspapers, intellectual magazines like The Economist. That's a good one. The Economist is really good for verbal because it's a difficult magazine to read because it's written by really good authors, right? Who use a lot of big words and all that. So yeah, if you have a lot of time left, more than 6 months, reading a newspaper, reading The Economist, and always trying to come up with a main idea will really help your verbal score. Unfortunately, a lot of students, they say they're going to do that, but then the time passes, and then they've got 3 months till the test. So if you only have a couple months till the test, you're better off doing the verbal practice passages, right? The outside reading is only good if you have a lot of time, more than 6 months. That's a good question though. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I think this is similar. Yeah. So. Okay.
That one.
Okay. So just real quick, do you recommend they take this AAMC one or a Princeton Review test?
No, I recommend Princeton Reviews
Yeah.
because you're going to get a better score analysis. Also, all of the AAMC exams, if you're doing it with AAMC, you have to purchase it, and you're going to get those for free as part of your Princeton Review program anyways. So why pay twice, for that? And ours is free. So it's free. It has a better analysis of your performance afterwards. I think it's better to just do Princeton Reviews.
Yeah, and that's actually really good because, in my opinion, so the AAMC in the past released about 7 full-length practice tests to give you a good idea of what the old MCAT would look like. So from my experience and from nearly all of the other students I've taught experiences, these AAMC practice tests are your best resource. Why? Because it's from the people who create the tests themselves, right? So it's the most, in my opinion, it's the best resource you're going to get that imitates the real test. So unfortunately, they only give you one for this new MCAT. So what does this mean? You've got to save this one until about a week before the test, or maybe like 2 weeks before the test, because if you do this one in the beginning, you wasted it, right? Because this, in my opinion, because nobody knows in reality what the new MCAT is going to be. We have good predictions, but since there hasn't been a test yet, not till next week, we don't actually know, right? So the only people who do actually know are AAMC. So they released one practice test now. They're going to release a second one in the fall, which is good. So you want to save those because, it's going to, in my opinion, it's a good reflector of what your score is going to be, right? So in my opinion, for the old tests, the practice tests were really representative, right? They were helpful. So save that one. And just as another side note, when you do these practice tests, so Princeton Review ones included, you want to pretend like you're in the actual test, right? So you want to set aside 7.5 hours. If you live with roommates, you want to sort of, only talk to them on the breaks if you're going to talk to them at all, right? So you want to basically do that 7.5 hour test, treat it like it's the real thing, take the breaks, take the lunch, right? Just pretend you're there, because if you do this 6 or 7 times, when you get to the real one, it's not going to be as big of a deal as otherwise, right? So for example, if you've only taken one full-length practice test and you go into the real one, it's going to be stressful. But if you've done this, I recommend at least 5 practice tests before you take your test, right? Because that'll give you a good idea of how you're doing. So if you've taken that many, once you get to the real one, it's just another day, right? It's no different than what you've already been doing. Okay. Yeah. So do you guys have any questions about MCAT or anything at all that we've talked about? Yeah.
Question, if we decide to buy, the MCAT reports through Princeton, would they be helpful to practice those ones, even though this one's a little different?
Are you talking about the old review books?
Yeah.
I mean, I would recommend the new ones because here's the thing: they've taken stuff out since the old test. They've actually cut a lot of information out. So it could help if you focus on the topics that remain, right? So for example, in organic chemistry, they really cut that. I mean, you have to take a year of organic chemistry to get into medical school, and I would estimate about 10 to 15% of that year-long course shows up on the MCAT. The rest doesn't, right? So, but on the old test, the old MCAT, you had to know specific reactions, right? So you had to remember stuff like a Wolff-Kishner reaction or a Michael reaction. All types of random reactions were on this new test. There's very few reactions to know. So that's the only thing I'd be a little careful of is if you're using old material, compare what you're studying with the syllabus that MCAT or AAMC releases. Make sure you're not studying things that are no longer on the test. Yeah.
Is bio and general chem the same for this new one?
You mean in the same section?
Like the same topics and
Material?
yeah.
Okay, so biology, they have actually probably increased the material you have to know. Chemistry, they've definitely cut it, right? So chemistry used to be 50% of, so they not only cut how much comprises each section, right? So it used to be 50% in the physical sciences, it used to be 50% GChem, 50% physics. Now it's 33% in the chemical and physical, in this section, chemical and physical foundations, and 5% in biology. So they not only cut the percentage of questions that come from general chemistry, but they also cut, I'd say roughly, 20 to 25% of the topics you had to know. So the ones that they've cut that I'd be careful with in studying is general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics. But what they've most likely increased is biology, or not most likely, they